All right, welcome in everyone. Today it is my pleasure to host a very special guest to talk all about Godzilla collecting in the modern age. He's the owner and principal of the California based company Hybrid Design, working with clients to elevate their branding strategies, including Apple, Nike, Lego, and more. And he's also the owner and principal of Super7, bringing modern spins on timeless properties, including Voltron and, of course, Godzilla. Brian Flynn, welcome to the channel.
Welcome to the channel. It's a lovely day for everyone. I hope it's nice and sunny in Canada.
It's warm and it's rainy, so we'll take
50,
that. It's
50.
usually cold.
Yeah, cold and rainy is worse than warm and rainy.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it. I've got a whole bunch of questions because I've watched all the interviews. I keep up to date with all the Godzilla stuff, and I am really eager to learn more about what it's like to work with this brand, as well as being a fan of this brand, because you've been a Godzilla fan, I mean, longer than I've been alive, as we just...
Off air we were talking about it. It's like I started collecting it officially in 91 when the Bandai 91 figures came out. And that's when I started going backwards and looking for older stuff. But I started collecting in 91, so 33 years ago.
That's a whole lot of Godzilla to experience.
It's a bunch of nerdery.
Super7 actually has a long history with the brand. You got the license in 2021 to make figures, the figures that you want to make, Reaction, Ultimate, Super Cyber, all that great stuff. But your origin with Super7 actually starts back in 2001. You started as a magazine that was covering vintage Japanese toys, which included different variations of the Marusan Godzilla.
Yep.
You eventually got to work with some of these companies to do mail-in figures.
The very first issue, we had a clear gray Bear Model 54.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you had a special colored Gorgo as well.
Yes, the M1 Gorgo that was colored up to match the Flesh Godzilla, but the blue wasn't quite right, but yes.
That moment comes, 2021, you get the license. And I know for you guys at Super7, you usually like to hold licenses closer to the chest and wait until you have product ready to show, or closer to that time to actually announce these. But it was like you got the Godzilla license, and like 2 weeks later, you were like, guys, we got Godzilla. Can you walk me through that moment? What's it like to actually get to make the Godzilla toys that you want to make?
I think there's two different questions there. The moment is a bit different. Obviously, we made a lot of Godzilla stuff in the early 2000s, collaborating with Japanese companies. So what happened with us is the more collaborations we made, that stuff generally outsold some of the normal stuff that they were making. And so we made quite a lot, but we were never able to get a domestic license. And mostly it was because Toho just really didn't have a setup for licensing outside of Japan. So it was very difficult to do. And we tried a couple different times. They would start up and then it maybe not work out, and let's try it again. And it just never sort of came together. And then NECA had it for a little while. And then after NECA, we were able to get it. And, at that point, and so with the current group, if you will, there's a Toho US office that has been around for many, many years now, and they have a really good handle on it. And so the good news is then when we walk in with all of our knowledge and history about the toy side specifically, like we may not be talking about, making other product, like we can get into the weeds and go into everything that we want to make. And there's people there that understand what we're talking about and where it's coming from, and they can relay that back overseas. So I feel like we're in a really good space with Toho right now. The team over there is really good. I think that Japan's finally really found a really good rhythm with the United States market, because there's always a bit of a disconnect. I'll use the obvious version. If there's not people working together, Godzilla's not green.
Right.
It's like, he's never been green, ever, in a movie, any place else. But in America, Godzilla is green.
Right.
And if you don't make a green Godzilla, something's wrong. And, making sure both sides understand that. Because if they're out of sync and you start submitting green Godzilla stuff, they'll be like, Godzilla's not green, rejected. It's like, Godzilla's not green in Japan.
Right.
It's green over here. So it's a lot of that. So there's really a good meshing now between both Toho in Japan and the Toho offices in America that's allowing us to get to all this great stuff. And that's the exciting part, because it's definitely had over the last 23 years moments where it kind of works and then it doesn't, and you know. And so I think that's why you're seeing so much great stuff these days.
Yeah, and that's really a good point, is that there's just so much, right? And there's something for this type of collector. You know, if you're the Mondo soft vinyl or movie monster series for Bandai, you got your stuff over here. You know, Haya Toys making some great legendary, starting with classics over there. Super7's got the reaction figures and those ultimates that really capture the feeling of what it was like to hold a big toy in your hands.
Yeah.
And it's a time to celebrate. There's so much stuff out there.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this across other licenses as well, but there's never been more toys being made of a higher quality and more availability than there are right now. If you go back a ways, you know, people are like, oh my God, the Trendmaster stuff. But if you take a discerning eye to the Trendmaster stuff, you're like, this is not very on point. Doesn't mean people didn't love it.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. Like, that was your only option, though. The Imperial Godzilla was the only option for, 8 years in America, was that rubber Godzilla. And, it's a far cry from, what it looks like on screen in a lot of cases.
Sure. Yeah. You see a Biollante with feet, and it's like, okay, well, do you want the Biollante with the feet or not? There's no other option.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, which one do you want? Oh, none? Okay. But, at the same time, people come to Godzilla in different times and different places and from different points of view, and that's what matters to them. Like, Kyle and I joke all the time because he loves that Trendmaster Space Godzilla.
Right.
When that Trendmaster Space Godzilla came out, I was like, what is this? What color is this? What is going on? This is,
Yeah.
But he got it and he loved it. And so no different than if you really take a discerning eye to the Shogun Godzilla, which I love to death. It's my favorite Godzilla ever. It's not based on any movie that's ever been made.
Yeah.
It's just, I made a giant lizard. We called it Godzilla.
With a fist that flings.
Well, there was other shooting hands, so they had to keep that. But it's the same thing where you're like, I don't know where this sculpt came from, but it's genius, and I love it. Does it have to be factually accurate to be something that I love? No.
I don't have time today, but at some point, I would love to talk to you about the Shogun Godzilla and how the need quotation for accuracy has evolved over time to like what I would say in an insufferable degree, personally.
Yes.
Whereas back then it was like, yeah, it doesn't look like Godzilla, but it's a great toy. It's a fun toy. And that I think is what it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there is a fine line of that. That's really like for me, what was one of the things that was so interesting about the vintage toys was the distortion through the material. And that probably sounds a bit opaque, but what I mean is just like, if you're going to make Godzilla out of soft vinyl in 1966, how you pull that out of a mold has limitations. How you make it articulate has limitations. You have price point limitations, all that. So the figures are in the end designed, and stylized to be as effective as possible with the method of manufacturing. So, and then they take in the aesthetics of, well, kids are going to buy these, so they make them cute. Like that Baragon is as cute as it comes. Now, does that really look like Baragon and it's bright orange? Yeah. No, but it's amazing.
Yes.
And that distortion of character to me was wonderfully exciting. But I would say that even in the 90s, especially as you get to like the 98, 99 Bandais, where they're really hitting their stride, you really had two divergent camps. You had people that loved the old toys. I love the Popey toys. I love the Yamakatsu toys. I love the Beaumark toys and Marathon toys. Or you had people that were like, no, this vinyl looks like the character in the movie. And that's what I'm interested in. The rest of this is garbage.
Mhm.
And I think that's just two divergent point of views. You have that, especially when you deal with super robots. People that are like, I need to see every rivet, and that's exciting to me. And then there's another guy that's like, I don't know, he goes like this and he shoots a thing. And it's kind of two different points of view, neither right, neither wrong.
Right.
But I think you diverge. I think over time, what you've seen though is that the vast majority of the product has become hyper realistic
Yes.
and less stylized. And the stylized stuff has always been more interesting to me than the hyper realistic. I'm not saying that I don't like the hyper realistic. Let's not take it the wrong way. It's just that the distorted and new versions and tweaks and twists that characters take and their designs, that's always been fascinating to me, because then it doesn't look like anything else I have.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about before we went live. It's that, some people like mustard on their hot dog, some people like relish. It's, if I'm in the relish camp, it doesn't mean that the mustard people are wrong, but it also means that the mustard people shouldn't harass me because I like my crazy orange Baragon.
Or why can't they can be mustard and you can be relish and this other guy can be ketchup, but you can all still love the hot dogs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
I love that analogy. So back on Godzilla Day, you did a little brief chat with Veebs, and you showed off a Jet Jaguar that you had done with Marmot, I believe, or M1.
No, this was with M1.
M1, yes. M1. And my immediate thought looking at that was, oh, that would make for a really cool Super Cyborg. And so my question is, do you think that at some point we'll see like Super7 inspired variants, like have something in that clear gray bear model have a Super Cyborg colored like Jet Jaguar? Or do you think that's like a little too self-aggrandizing?
I don't know if it's going to be as literal as a one-to-one of that, but I think if anybody's paying attention, especially because I can see the blind boxes behind you, is as we really get into blind box and variants and recolors, and then there's a camp that hate recolors and there's a camp that love recolors. You definitely see all the inspiration and all the point of view that we've had throughout the years in dealing with Japanese vinyl, in making stuff like that, being applied to how we release action figures. Like, I think everybody at this point is fairly, if you're paying attention to the reaction line, is like, oh, they'll make the regular version. Then they're going to make a glow in the dark version and it'll come on this illustrated card. It's almost like a formula at this point, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, why is it glow in the dark? Well, it's a throwback of two versions. It's one, as the vinyl collectors, we always liked having that lineup because I'll back up. Why you see so many colorways in vinyl these days is when you go back to the old days with vinyl, there was no QC. They didn't care. It was the cheap crap throwaway toy. So if they ran out of blue paint, they painted it with green. They ran out of green paint, they painted it with red. So you could find all these variants in spray colors, variants in vinyl colors, that all were naturally occurring. They were not premeditated. When you get to the Hawaii versions, those are premeditated. When you get to the flesh-based vinyls, they were going out of business. They didn't have enough money to dye vinyl, so they made them all the same color and then just painted over them. So you had all these variables that you could collect, but none were made expressly to like make people chase them or make something rarer. It was just an organic nature of the process. So when you get into then making vinyls later, the idea of making recolors isn't so much about, oh, I can make this and use this again. It's like, I love having lots of these with variable colorways. And so it's like, oh, I love that sculpt, that Godzilla, that this. So I want to see it in different colors. That's coming directly out of vinyl. Then if you talk about action figures, you can really say, most of them just had one release, but if you go back to the Remcos, they always had a glow in the dark version. They had a parallel Remco glow figure. So sort of like Star Wars always does the clear blue, hologram version.
Right.
So we start making glows, and that's a throwback to an action figure collector. It was like, oh, I'd have a regular one and a glow one. So we're taking that inspiration from vinyls and then inspiration of the glow. And then some of it's very literal and some of it's wackadoodle in there, like the pink and green on Hedera, because it's Hedera. You like, let's go crazy. So while that that clear M1 with the pipe cleaners, that was a distinct reference to like, all right, if we go backwards, what happened there was UG at M1, they never made a vintage standard size Jet Jaguar. And like we had done with a couple other figures, he was like, oh, collection filler, we should make this thing. They made a giant size, they made a 5-inch, but they never made the 9-inch. So he made it as a 9-inch. And then what we said was, okay, hey, there's all those what they called cyborg, but the clear vinyls with the tinsel and the glitter pipe cleaners in there. Astromy was the line, but they made a couple different Ultraman figures and a Godman and Ultra 80, I think. I think those are the three that they made that all had pipe cleaners in them. So we're like those figures with the pipe cleaners, let's do it to Jet Jaguar because he's a robot with the pipe cleaners. And we mixed all that together. So we're pulling all of it together in a new place. It's a long sort of way of saying all that stuff we're doing is what you start to see creeping up in the chase figures for the blind boxes and some of the other things that we're doing, where it's like, okay, what are the other fun things that we can do so that you can have this world of them? You don't have to buy them all, but for that guy that's like, oh, I love having all these variables and variants, that person can get into it. So back to your question, direct, probably I won't literally make that orange and clear Jet Jaguar, but we're taking that same inspiration and thinking and applying it to the action figures that we are making.
I love the blind boxes, and just because we're talking about it, I can't get them up here in Canada unless I'm going to eBay. And so I was just curious, like, actually, so I saw on Big Bad Toy Store.
You can't get all of them, or you can't just get some of them. The Target exclusive one probably is the ones you can't get.
So far it's been the Godzilla Island one, so those ones, and then it's been the Shogun ones. Both have been Target exclusive.
There's one that's coming out this week that's not Target exclusive.
Okay.
Those started out not as Target exclusives, but Target was so excited about them that they ended up basically wanting to buy them all and make them exclusive to their store. Which, you know, in a post-COVID world, sometimes you're like, oh, yes, thank you. I would like you to do that. It's been very interesting. We did Blind Box 6 years ago with Alien. We did 3 waves of Blind Box around Alien, and we made an Iron Maiden Blind Box. And then for whatever reason, we just stopped. We're like, all right, cool, that was fun. Boop, 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 moved on. And we didn't even think about it. And what's been very interesting is the idea that is actually a different customer than you are part of that customer, but it's actually a different customer. And we didn't realize how limiting some of this stuff was, which is if I put that figure on a card back and we're hanging that on a peg, the person buying that 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 out of 10, which was 4 out of 5, we've reduced our fractions, is a collector as opposed to a fan, a child, a kid.
A general customer.
A customer that would like a Godzilla. But the moment I put it in a box, that person all of a sudden wants that. And it's just sort of like, oh, there's more blind box stuff coming, not because it's necessarily about chase and rarity or how do I get you to buy this again. I want people to buy my toys and play with them and have them and enjoy them. And I had been artificially limiting the kinds of people that were able and the places where people were able to find them and buy them.
Right.
By simply taking that same Shogun Godzilla, taking it off a card and putting it in a blind box, all of a sudden, so many more people were able to buy it. And it's sort of like, it's a thing where you're like, oh, wait, I realize I make collector toys, but that's not always the only person that's buying toys from me.
Right.
And so I'm sure as some more blind boxes and stuff comes out, I'm sure there's going to be some people that are annoyed that that's what's happening. It's not to say, let me back up. We're not stopping figures on card.
Right. Yes.
We're not stopping new sculpts, but it's like, wait, I already have this figure on card. Why is it in a blind box now? And it's like, well, that's for a slightly different customer. You may be that customer as well, but you don't have to be.
Yes.
So I think there's going to be a little bit more blind box to come out. And I think that there's just something fun about the blind boxes too.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, I'm like hooked on the blind boxes personally. Like, I went to eBay, I got a whole case of the Shogun ones. I know there's repeats, but I don't really care. Like, it's
Yeah,
just fun.
well, I'm sorry that in Canada you had to go that route, but Target does not exist in Canada.
Yes,
But
unfortunate.
we're trying to work on that. I mean, Canada's a funny one. Like, we get bits and pieces with Toys R Us Canada, but then it kind of comes in bits and pieces. EB Games is still up there, and that happens in bits and pieces. There's no place where it can be like, oh, this place always carries what we make.
Right.
It's very fits and starts. And I would love there to be just a space in Canada where it'd be like, okay, this place, you can always get it.
The one-stop
But
shop.
it has not been the place yet. It's like even dealing with Amazon. Like,
Yes.
Amazon Canada is different than Amazon US. And
Yeah.
it's a whole different thing. And it's like, we should be able to have some of this stuff pop up on Amazon Canada, but we're working on it. I'm trying to make your life easier, Kyle. It just never goes as quickly as we think.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Because anything to make the product a little bit easier to get up here after our terrible conversion rate is much
Yes.
appreciated.
No, yeah. Well, just be glad you're not in Japan.
Yes, absolutely.
Because right now you're like, buying from Japan's great.
Oh, I know. Are any of the upcoming Glow figures going to be purple? Purple's my favorite color, and it hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet. You mean purple glow, like glowing purple or purple spray?
Purple spray.
Oh,
Like these guys. There's a distinct lack of purple.
there's a distinct lack of purple. I'm living in late 2025, early 2026 planning right now, so I can't remember exactly, but there are some really wacky ones coming.
Okay.
So I'll just leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. All right. Well, Brian, anytime you make something purple, I want you to remember Kyle's gonna dig this. Okay.
All right. So we'll make one in purple and send it to you.
Oh, that would be my dream. That would be my dream. 2 exclusives that you've done have gone off gangbusters. The Thirsty for Blood Godzilla sold out, I think, when it hit your website in like 7 hours. And then the minus color variant sold out in 13 hours. And I was actually, so my wife and I recently had a baby, and we were awake while the numbers were dwindling down. And so it was kind of a fun thing to hang out with the guys on Discord or like just texting them being like,
and see how. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So two different dynamics completely. The Thirsty for Blood, that's one where went to San Diego with it, and I was like, I don't know if people are going to be interested. And Art is a really interesting person. So Art Adams, that Art is downstream from his Dark Horse run. When I lived in Portland, Art lived in Portland, and I collected Godzilla, and he supposedly collected Godzilla. And at the time, his girlfriend at the time ran a comic book store there. And I remember leaving a note at the comic book store at one point being like, hey, if you ever want to get together and talk about Godzilla stuff. And I never heard back from him, which is fine. Then we opened the store in San Francisco, and Art Adams had moved to San Francisco, and he became a regular customer. And then I got to know Art Adams, but it wasn't because I knew Art Adams because he was the guy that drew Godzilla and he was this famous comic book artist. It was, I knew Art Adams because he was a Godzilla nerd,
right,
toy collector, and that's how we became friends. And so we were talking about different things to do, and Kyle actually brought up the idea of repainting it as the Thirsty for Blood Dark Horse thing. And to be fair, because I'm old, I was just like, well, do enough people even know what that was? I mean, that was in the 90s, and Kyle's like, no, you have to remember, for somebody my age, this is our gateway to Godzilla. This was huge. For me, it was like, oh, it's a Godzilla comic. There was a Godzilla comic in the 70s,
Yeah.
Just, and he was like, it's huge for me. And I was like, all right, okay, that makes sense. I like the idea. Good idea, Kyle. And then I was like, I'm going to reach out to Art, even though we can use the art without his permission. I wouldn't do that.
Right.
I was like, I'm going to reach out to Art and see if he's cool with it. And of course, Art was like, oh, yeah, sounds great. And then I was like, but it would be really funny. What if we made a little you, like Godzilla's killing you? And he was like, yes, I'm 100%, 1000%, I'm into that. And then we went back to Toho and they're like, can't quite do that. How about it's just dead artist?
Okay.
And we're like, fine, it's dead artist. Like, it's just collateral. Or he couldn't be dead, he could be dying.
Okay.
And so to make that version special a little bit more, but just was like, it's Art Adams Godzilla.
Right.
So that Godzilla's holding Art. So once again, though, we show up in San Diego, like, I don't know if anybody's gonna want it or not. It's always a 50-50 with those, where you're like, it's either gonna do really well or it's gonna be on the site for 6 months. I don't know. And luckily people were very excited about it, and Art was beside himself. Art, always the sweetest guy ever. So that's the story behind that. With the minus color, obviously -1, when we started working on that figure, no one knew what that movie was going to be. We did it because we like Godzilla. It's a new Godzilla, especially Godzilla from Japan. Let's go. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a monster hit, obviously, no pun intended, or I'll take full credit for that. Pun intended. How about that? We had that pre-order open. It did really well. I got a lot of messages, surprisingly, after the fact. People were like, oh, I missed it. I was like, how can you miss it? There were 30 days, How did you miss it? Whatever. And when the minus color version was coming out to theater, we talked about that. We'd be like, oh, that would be pretty cool to bring back. But I was wary of making too many, because you don't want to just keep, I hate to say beating a dead horse, but I don't want people to get too crazy with it.
Yeah.
To fine line. So that's what's happened to us in the past sometimes, where like we made the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ultimates and they did super bonkers. So we reordered them and they blew out. And everybody got really excited, and we reordered them a third time, and they're still on people's websites for 50% off.
Right.
But it's because we over made the demand, if that makes any sense. And I was a little wary of that. Plus, I was convinced, I still don't like it, but I was convinced that we could make it a limited one and tell people how many we made. Mm-hmm. I really dislike the concept of telling people how many you make, because it creates a few negative situations in my mind. One, people get hung up on how many were made and not what the actual product is. It drives demand usually from people that aren't buying it for themselves. They're buying it to resell because it's limited to this, or that gives it a justification. My take on that is that I'm making toys and I want to make as many as people want to buy.
Yeah.
I don't want to make any more. I don't want to make any less. If the sweet spot is just however many people want to buy. The secondary market in time will determine whether something is rare or not an artificial number that has been created by us. You can make, a limited edition of 10 of something that's a dog poo, but it's still a dog poo. Yes. I don't care if it's limited or not. Versus we can make something where we make an insane amount of them, but if even more people wanted it and found out later than we made, then it is worth something and rare. So I really dislike ever telling people run numbers, because they project onto it a bunch of artificial market dynamics that aren't true to what the toy is. And you see all that stuff where it comes out, and the week after it comes out, it's worth 4 times what it is. And then 2 months later, it's crashed below retail.
Yeah.
And I try to stay away from that, which is why I think as a brand as a whole, with few exceptions, you can look at most of our stuff and you're like, it just stays the course and slowly rises. There's never a spike, but there's never a crash.
Right.
And the only things that we really run into where it has not performed and where you see stuff on sale is when we got ahead of ourselves and we made too much stuff. And then, and it's usually because it was going really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so people kept ordering more and more and more and more and more. And then you sort of reach a cliff and then go over the cliff. And then it doesn't matter what the price is. Nobody needs it anymore. So I'm on a tangent. But that grayscale one still is like, I don't like the fact that we told people it was going to be artificially limited versus just letting it naturally sell through and just be what it was.
Right. And so to that point, like both of these exclusives have sold like very, very successfully. And I know, and I appreciate the fact that you try to protect the like value, but also like the nature of the exclusive. And so like that very first Shogun SDCC box you did, like that sold out very quickly. So you reissued the card one, same figure. Well, not exactly the same because the color was slightly different, but it was
slightly different green, but yes.
But it was accessible. It was like, if you care about this figure, forget the limited nature. If you just wanted the toy, here's the toy. Exactly. And so I wanted to ask, like, for the Thirsty for Blood or for Minus Color, are the doors closed to those, or do you think that we could revisit them in a different form factor or a different style?
I actually hadn't really considered that on either of those two. You know, with Thirsty for Blood, I kind of felt like it was a moment. But at the same time, if all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're selling, you know, I haven't looked, so I don't know. If you're like, oh, they sell for $500 because there's 2,000 people that didn't get them. Mm-hmm. I'm pulling random numbers out of my head, by the way. Then it's like, well, the goal isn't to make it terrible and painful to collect these toys. Like, oh, I want to collect that line, but now I got to spend $3,000 to get these 6 figures. Well, that's no fun. Mm-hmm. If that was the case, we would probably find a way to come back to it. But I hadn't actually checked in on either of those figures to see what was happening on them. Mm-hmm. It's not one of those that I get asked about enough where I'm like, oh, I got to go check and see what's going on.
Sure.
You know, where like MF Doom, I probably get asked 10 times a day, like, oh man, I missed MF Doom. Oh, you know, we're working on something.
Yeah. Well, Thirsty for Blood, I would say, is selling at about 3 times retail right now. Mm-hmm. Minus Color, we don't know yet because it's
not here.
Yeah. But when I announced on my channels that I was going to be chatting with you, like so many people were like, can you ask about Minus Color? Can you ask about it? Like it was gone before I even knew it was, it even knew it existed. And I was like thinking back to, okay, well, how do you protect the original one but also creating opportunity? Like, I think it's not to say that you guys are definitely doing it, but I feel like you have at least talked about a heat ray version of the normal -1. I feel like it's been at least talked or thought about. And I'm just wondering, like, maybe if there was, at the same time that one was up, if there was a black and white version of the heat ray version, maybe that is the one that people can get in on. That's like open order, get as many as you want. But then that first one is still sort of protected because that one is not being reissued in its original form.
I think for me, at least right now, what I would say on that is that I would like to get the regular and black and white one or Minus Color, you know, into people's hands first.
Sure.
Then once the dust settles, then we can determine what the true demand is. Because there may be, like I said, I'm making it up. Maybe 10 people message you that they missed that Minus Color. But there may have been 20 people that bought Minus Color from us specifically to throw it up on eBay.
Sure.
You know, and that's not the best answer. But if all of a sudden that does and that market dynamic balances itself back out, then there isn't a reason for me to come back to it. I would probably want to see what that's like first before preemptively jumping in there.
Yeah.
But like if things get too out of whack, we usually try to come back and recorrect. I try to protect it. I try to make sure everything's worth what you've paid for it. And then hopefully in time it's worth more, but it's at least worth what I always want it to be, always hold your value. It's always worth what you paid for. If it becomes more, that's a nice to have, but I'm not making investmentary collectibles. I'm making things that you want to buy and have.
Sure.
So that's why when you see stuff like Thirsty for Blood and somebody goes, oh, it's a recolor with just a couple extra parts. It's like, yes, because that's why it's at San Diego. It's not going to be a whole new release of a completely new figure. Like a whole new figure, that's something I need to sell wide to everybody so you can get it. When it's a subtle variation of some sort, it's not for everyone. That's where we have those moments.
Yep. And there's definitely been not just Super7, but other property or other people that have the property. Like they make those event color exclusives or versions subtly different, and people just have this really strange reaction as if they have to buy it or that they're missing out if they don't buy it. And it's just like, no, like this one's not for you. There will be another one for you. That's okay.
Yeah, and it's a catch-22 with all of that stuff because we all know then we're collectors, but we want them all. But yeah, having to have that freedom and that mental fortitude of like, it's okay if I don't have that one can be tricky sometimes.
Oh yeah, like that was me with the Heat Ray Ultimate. I was like, I don't display beam effects. It's I have the wave one. I really I wanted to buy it for the sake of completion, but I was like, realistically, I'm not going to be able to enjoy it in the way that it was intended to be enjoyed, and so I was able to build that resolve to let go of it.
Well, I mean that goes back the same thing. If you look back on our stuff way back when, the Bullmark giant size Godzilla, there's a lot of people that love that toy. I personally think it's atrocious. That's me. Because I love the original Bullmark 9-inch so much. So, we're talking, was this 2003? We convinced Marathon to remake the 9-inch Godzilla in the giant size scale. So I could take that one off my shelf and put that one up there. Yeah. That's the one I want. And we ended up doing, I think, 3 or 4 colorways of that figure, and he's made a ton of sense and everything. But it's that same thing where it's like, I don't want this. Just because it's a vintage Bullmark and it's Godzilla does not mean I have to have it.
Yep.
I can put that away. Now, I also then went back and made my own placeholder instead. But it's that same thing where it's like, technically, yes, I have 2 of them, and there's like 6 colorways of it or whatever, but it's not out.
Talking about Ultimates a little bit. Back in 2022, you did your rounds around Toy Fair with Jared from Toy Bro, Pixel Dan. You talked about 2 per wave, battle themed. And in those interviews, you said, and this was during pandemic time, so buying was up across the board, I think.
Yeah.
But you're saying, if people like it and they're like, oh no, like I'll do 4 per wave, or I could do 4 per wave, like give me the 4 per wave. Like I hadn't even seen them yet, and I was like, come on, like Brian, give me the 4 per wave, give me the 4 per wave. And literally 2 days later, I had a pipe burst, and I had to do $4,000 worth of plumbing work, and it was like, two per wave is fine. 2 per wave is good. And like it's funny now. It wasn't funny in the moment. It's funny now because like that was sort of the pace and it was the intention, and you can actually see how some of your other lines have come down to this, let's meet the $200 mark, because times are hard for people. Like you don't have all this money to throw away at something as optional as collecting. And so I'm curious to hear from you, like the Toho Ultimate strategy 2 per wave. How is that going for you?
It's going okay. I mean, that's part of it is that thing, and that if you said you checked out some of the other interviews, so you'll hear me talk about it from time to time about really being aware that we need to manage the wallet size, if you will. I'm not the only person making Godzilla. I'm not the only toy line you collect. So therefore, how often am I coming to that collector asking them to spend money to collect this line of figures? So you have to be very responsible to that. And I think I really think that it's really difficult to get above that 250 mark. So in the case of Godzilla's, or Toho or whatever, 85 times 2 is 170, plus you got to build in shipping and tax. It's like, it's a lot. Now, granted, the figures are gigantic, but it's still an investment, not an investment in terms of return, but investment in terms of like, it's not an insignificant amount of money. If I was going to say to you like, hey, we're going to go out for dinner tonight, it's going to be $200, you'd be like, oh no, I don't do that.
Right.
So when I say it's 2 figures and it's going to be $200, like, you have to be very aware of how often you can do that. And it's, not that often is the answer. And we really try to manage that. At the same time, I will say that I think the public's appetite for pre-orders sort of across the board has waned immensely. So
Yes.
I think, we're definitely taking a long, hard look at what that looks like, because we're just seeing pre-orders perform less and less and less than they were. And it's not for lack of demand, and it's not for lack of, I think, interest in the property. I think it's simply like, look, dude, everybody went to pre-order. And I just can't do this anymore. I'll just, and for a lot of people, I'll just wait for it to go in stock. So, we're definitely trying to figure out how we move to more in stock, but then you sort of run into the same issue, which is then you have to predict what you need. So had I been doing an in stock on Godzilla -1, we definitely would have underserved demand.
Right.
Because it sold better than we expected. Where by allowing everybody to pre-order it performed better. But when you're dealing with some of this other stuff, it's definitely trickier. So I don't have a straight answer there, other than that we're really looking at, like, when we know a thing comes in stock, we sell it much better. I'll use a separate example. Like, you could pre-book the Super Cyborg Mechagodzilla for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it sold modestly at best, in the pre-books. It didn't do that great. The moment it came in stock, sold really well.
Yeah.
And so that's really where the collector is these days, is like, I can't either afford, I don't want, or I'm just over any sort of pre-booking and pre-buying, especially if they believe they can get it cheaper after release.
Right.
So then we've got to figure out, if we want to make this stuff, then we have to take more bets and predictions and bring it in to make it work. So I think, I don't have a specific answer, but I think more and more you'll see us transitioning into more stuff being in stock rather than a pre-order. But it has its I don't know, challenges.
Right. I would imagine there's challenges to both ends.
Yes.
We haven't had a mainline wave go up since July with Space Godzilla Mogera. Wave 3 landed. I got my meltdown up there, but like, this Destoroyah is insane. It is. I knew it was going to be crazy when I first saw the renders and the images, but getting it in hand, like maybe to the point we've just discussed, is that it's an experience. And I'm just kind of curious. There was an initial plans, I thought, for the next wave to go up on Godzilla Day, and then things got shifted around. Maybe it was -1, maybe it was other things. But do you have a sense of when we might see Wave 5?
We're working on some stuff. Off the top of my head, didn't come prepared as I could have, but we're definitely working on a couple things. And that destroyer is bonkers.
Oh yeah.
But that 1200 or 1800 degree Godzilla is, I can't believe they let us make it. I was so excited about that.
Yeah.
Skin falling off, just all of it. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is the best Godzilla ever.
Yeah, and I think there's no market alternative to this. Like, people can't say, oh, I have the Monster Arts, I have the Bandai. Like, nothing else exists. It was just this one. And I think just across the board, like, everyone loved that Meltdown Godzilla. I think a lot of people love the Destoroyah too. But it was like, when there's no alternative to that, it's the first of its kind, essentially. Just off the chain, people are already saying, like, give me a clear green one, like a reactor meltdown, or like the reactor glow.
Like looking through the screen.
Yeah, exactly. Like, give me that translucent green version. And I was just, yeah. Awesome wave. Fantastic wave. Well, I'm glad to hear that wave 5 is that things are happening.
Yeah. It's just a bit slower. I think, -1 has crept in here a little bit. There's some other stuff that we're working on that's crept in a little bit. There's some more stuff coming. It's just going to take a hot minute more. Plus, it took a long time to get these other ones out, and I don't want that to happen again.
Sure.
But I'm not allowed to say much more right now.
Okay, fair. I don't want anybody to yell at you. So I do have a bit of a greedy question, Brian. If you can't answer it, it's okay. I love watching your interviews with Eggman because he'll be like, Brian, what's after Cat's Lair? What?
Yeah, constantly. What's next? What's next?
He's
What's
like,
next? Come on.
Yeah, like, can I get when's Sky Cutter? When's the Mirage? I love it. And then you're like, no, I can't tell you, Eggman. He's like, oh, okay. And then he quietly puts it away for the next interview.
Yeah.
But I do have a question regarding reaction.
Yes.
2 of my favorite Showa characters are Ebera and Titanosaurus.
Yes.
I have made peace with the fact that Ebera is not the most attractive option for a toy. But that giant lobster doesn't get much love. He doesn't. But he was I think he was my first Godzilla movie, so he has a special place in my heart. But I'm always shocked to hear that the Japanese audience doesn't care for Titanosaurus. That he never really took off.
You have to kind of preface it in general, which is like Toho never really took off.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
You have Ultraman and Kamen Rider and all this stuff, and then Godzilla's down here a little bit.
Right.
Everywhere else, Godzilla's massive. But,
yeah.
Titanosaurus is an amazing character, and we will definitely get there sooner or later. There's some really deep cuts that I'm trying to get to right now.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well,
Titanosaurus is bad to the bone. He's great.
However,
Ebera kind of sucks though.
Ebera, my boy.
But that's the thing. But I love Gezera.
Oh yes.
So
yes.
And the funny story, I think I've told it before, is as a kid, we were living on Air Force Base in Germany, Bitburg Air Force Base, and they had Saturday matinees at noon, and it was G-rated movies always, and I think they were 50 cents for the movie. Maybe it was a quarter. I don't remember, but it was for kids.
Yeah.
And I went, and one day it was Yog, Monster from Space, aka Gezera. And Yog comes out and he smashes the ship and he does everything. And the guy washes up on the shore. You see his eye sees him. The guy on the shore wakes up and runs off. Then they do that overhead shot where Gezera comes up to the beach and stands up on his tentacles and starts walking. As a kid, I was just like, oh shit. He can get me. Just like brain out the ears. Yeah. Took off, ran out the theater all the way home.
Wow.
So still to this day. So that one's Gezera is my favorite from that. But I don't see us getting to a Gezera figure anytime soon. Gezera, Kamiba, Ebera, that sort of club is an unfortunate. As much as we may love them, I don't think we're going to get there.
It's understandable, right? And it speaks to the reliance on the casual customer, right? The casual customer might show up for a Baragon that looks really fucking cool, but Ebera, at the end of the day, he's a lobster.
I think even if you're talking about diehard Godzilla collectors, most of them are like, I don't need Ebera.
All right, Brian, we've reached 4 o'clock. Well, here in the Eastern time zone. I want to be respectful of your time as we wrap up. Is there anything you'd like to share, or where can folks find out more about what you're up to?
Obviously, they can jump on over. The Instagram is great, just at Super7, just SUPER 7, Super7.com. I know there's a Twitter and a Facebook, and I think technically there's even a TikTok. I don't think we use it, but I think there's technically one there. Any of those things work. Just check it in, follow it up. I know on my team side, there's the SMS sign up, which is the text message sign up thing. That apparently is really popular for people because it's just like, it's not like, oh, I have to go to my feed and my algorithm and all that other stuff. people really like the text thing because it just, oh, hey, here's the news for today, or here's the news for yesterday. And it's like a 1-day hit summary.
Yeah.
That doesn't come through email and stuff. That apparently has become super popular. And if you want to know what's going on, that's apparently a super popular thing. So
perfect.
There you go. I don't know.
All right. Well, we've got a few ones. I'll throw some handles up on screen in the edited version just so people know where to find you. Brian, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. And
no, thank you. This has been great. You know, and I'm happy to come back another time. We can talk specific about all sorts of stuff rather than me just rambling about stories about me being scared of sea monsters.
Scared of Godzilla. Yeah, well, I mean, I imagine you guys are gearing up for San Diego. It's months away, but you guys are gearing up for that.
No, we start gearing up for San Diego in August.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. That's the lead time.
That's the lead time.
Yeah,
that's the lead time.
Well, maybe post San Diego, maybe after Wave 5 Ultimates comes out, maybe I'll reach out. Maybe we can chat and
of course,
and go from
definitely.
There. Awesome,
wonderful.
Brian. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
I will try. Thank you very much. Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
man.
Bye.
See ya.